Okay, call this CB Board of Directors meeting to order. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Motion and second, is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Aye. Do I hear a motion to approve the vouchers?
I'll make that motion.
A motion, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
A motion and second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I'll turn it over to General Manager for approval of monthly reports for December.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's always good to start out with, we're doing great, and we are ahead of our forecast, and our cash position is strong, and we anticipate it's going to continue to stay that way. But I'll let Dudley have a few words if you don't care, Dud.
Okay, for the month of December, the electric department had a net income of $546,000. Sales were really high. The weather was cold. I'll show you that in a second. That's just the electric department, $582,000 ahead of the forecast on net income. The change in net assets in the water and sewer department was $53,000, which is a good solid month. So the water and sewer department was $23,000. Run this by you real quick. Our long-term partnership credit, which we're so proud of, year-to-date is $731,000 from TVA. Since we started that in September of last year, that's hitting it right at $1.7 million. I'll show you this because of the reason the sales are so high, and in case you get cornered in the street by a customer, why did my bill go up so much in December? You see blue is this year, red is last year, and yellow is a 15-year average. You can see that November was a mild month, December was really cold, and January is really cold too. And when you have that much difference between those months, and even comparing to last year, the bills are going to seem high to customers. They always tend to remember that one day that it was 60 degrees and they wore shorts outside, and it really wasn't that cold, but it was. And these numbers come from the National Weather Service. If they should say something about rates to you, these are this chart right here. This chart right here shows the rates. The green is the small commercial. The blue is the residential. But you can see all the way back in 2017, the kilowatt hour rate was 9.71 cents in February. It's 9.32 cents this year in February. The rates have actually gone down over time, and that's because the fuel costs have gone down that TVA charges. So when if someone were to approach you and say, it's because y'all keep raising rates, no, that's not true. You can see that's a pretty flat line right there. And those humps you see in there are the fuel costs that adjust every month by TVA, and also the seasonal charge that adjusts by TVA. But no, the rates haven't gone up in a long time, really. It's the weather that impacts that. The one thing that's the hardest to make customers understand is just because you leave your thermostat set on 72 doesn't mean you're going to use the same usage. If it gets colder outside, that just means that heat pump's going to kick on more, run longer to keep it at 72 degrees. That's the one thing we hear the most is, I haven't touched that thermostat. Well, last month it was 72 degrees outside, so it didn't kick on and off. This month it's 40 outside, so it's running a lot more.
Oh, the worst is resistant heat. I keep it on low, although that red glow never goes off, That's because that thing's running off. That's the worst heat you can get.
So that's just some information for you that might help you should someone approach you. Really, that's all I have. Both departments are doing very solid, very happy with the numbers, and hopefully they'll continue for the year.
Do I hear a motion for approval of monthly reports?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
With a motion and a second, is there any discussions? Anybody have any questions?
Just quick question. Do we have like a day's cash target that we want to try to get to, or is that where we're at in terms of the electric department?
Yeah, let me answer that.
I mean, you're doing so well in the water, I'm kind of like,
Well,
I know it's wrong.
no, it's a little bit different. We would like to have 20 to 30 days in electric. The I guess the good solid benchmark is if you're above 10, you're in good shape. But we're very conservative. And we have backstops to that aren't reflected in some because we have, again, as conservative as we are, in electric, we have no debt in water and sewer, but in electric, we have set aside one full year of P&I over and above the reserve. We have a sinking fund, and then we have this reserve that represents one full year of P&I. So
But that's reflected as probably a restricted asset.
It
It's
is.
not showing on the balance sheet.
Exactly.
I mean, it's on the balance sheet.
It's not shown
But it's
as-
not as an unrestricted asset.
That's right, that's cash reserve.
So it's,
And the same with the health fund, that's in that restricted, but it's
Sure.
really not restricted.
And that is, we
It's up here.
voluntarily do that. It's not that we're required to do that.
so ballpark, you think that's?
Ballpark is
that's-
maybe 3 or 4
Oh, okay, so
additional
you're-
days.
Okay, good, okay,
Yeah.
good, okay, great. I like your approach on that, though. Okay. Thank you.
Steve Combs, did you have a question?
No, sir.
Okay,
I'm fine.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Motion carries. Project status reports, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're tracking 4 budget projects in electric. I'll just talk to you a little bit about the last 2. Unless you have questions, we've gone over those. They're on budget and they're on schedule. But we're doing the Riverside Drive upgrade. We've started construction on that this week, and that expects to be completed in March. That's work order 1237. And in work order 1244, it's 1-0 all aluminum cable, aerial cable on Farmer Hollers Road. And we design, as you know, for budgetary items. We try to anticipate the cost of that. Where this we have in the budget at $350,000, I believe, is what that is. It was a little over. I know I'm talking about the work order. This we're going to do pre-construction, and we anticipate that to begin late February or early March. So both of these last 2, the Riverside Drive just started, and Farmer Hollers will start probably in early March. That's what I have for electric. And if you've got a question, I'll be glad to answer
Any
anything you've got.
questions?
No.
Hearing none, proceed.
In the water and sewer, we're tracking that one work order there, and that is the dog leg there on North Main Street. And we are working with TDOT, and that's a little bit of the holdup, is because they want us to push back the date where we can pave that. They would rather have it next month than by the end of this month. So we're doing all we can to speed that up. But that's on schedule and on track, and it should be completed by the end of this month.
Any other questions?
No.
Moving on to approval of work order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Work order 1260. Got a little ahead of myself because we budgeted this at $350,000, $325,000. And you see that comes in, the total cost, but we always put a 10% contingency on there, and that pushes it to $354. So it's over what we originally budgeted for this, and that's what was approved in the capital budget that you all approved. And that cost with the contingency is $354. And this project is going to put new 4-0 aluminum aerial cable down Carroll Hollow, and this also is going to bring the cable that is weaved through the backyards, bring it all out onto the street right away. Every time we do an upgrade, I look to bring wherever that line is, I want to bring it on the street for a lot of reasons. First of all, you can reach it with a bucket, and you're not back there traipsing through somebody's pristine they've got all kinds of good stuff back there, and they ask us to pay for that when we trench through there. So everything's coming to the front, and also when you police it, you can go down and you can see where the cable's down. So it's a lot easier to do that. We bring it all out to the road. This will do that, and this will bring a lot of flexibility in our switching, because it's going to give us a link between 25W and Sulphur Springs. This is the last part of that. So this cable is big enough to handle a lot of this switching that we do, and it's all, again, tracking on our ability to bring people back online when circuits are out. So I recommend approval of work order 1260 in the amount of $354,475.
Do I hear a motion to approve the work order?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Anybody have any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries and the work order is approved. Move on to the approval of the CUB pension plan.
This is the fiduciary oversight review, and Dudley, I wonder if you have a few words you care to say on that.
Sure, it seems, we do these quarterly, and it seems like we do them more than that, but it's
It does.
quarterly. And, we do these via WebEx now, which we were discussing before the meeting. And, Greg and I meet with, Bob Cross and his staff, and we talk about all these investments and where we're at and where we've been year to date and so forth, and whether we should make any changes. If you look at the plan performance for the quarter, it was 13.92%. It lines up really well with the benchmarks. Year to date was 15.85%, which lines up better than the benchmarks. You look at our 1 year, our 3 years, 9.79, 5 years, 10.49, 10 years, 7.91. All that really looks good. Of course, we've been through some good times. Our chairman could probably speak more to that than I can, but I will show you this. The beginning balance at the start of the quarter was $14,000,005. Our ending balance was $16,888,000. It was a great quarter. Increase of $2.3 million in the quarter. We're very happy with that. We'd take that every time if we could get that, but life doesn't work that way. So, and they had no recommendations for changes. They feel like what we've got is working well, matching up with what we're targeting, and that's all I have, unless our chairman would like to add something, because he's more
No, I mean,
knowledgeable.
you know, when I meet with my clients, they look at that bottom line. What was the return? And our return was 15%, and that's a great return. Particularly where we were, if you think back in the second quarter, and you know, they did a good job. And go ahead, Steve.
I'm fine. No, I hadn't said it.
Okay. So great return, good year, and I'm expecting another good year in 2021. So I'm pleased with the job they're doing for us. With that being said, do I hear a approval of the CB pension plan?
I'll make that motion.
In a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we move on to the approval of contract to audit accounts.
Believe it or not, this comes around, we had a 3-year contract with the Brown, Jake, and McDaniels, and that's come around. I'll ask our CFO to make,
Okay,
tell us a little bit about
I'll tell you, what they're proposing, and as they have in the past, they will offer us a 1-year increase of, which would be 3%. This 3%, which is $966 more than last year. If you total the three of them, it's $32,340. Last year, just to give you an idea, because we were under this same deal before, where it could be no more than 3%. The first year they went up 3%, and then the second year they went up $287. It wasn't even 1%, and that was just on the pension. They held the electric and water the same. So they're not trying to get every penny they can. They do a really good job for us, a $966 increase. I would recommend that we do the 3-year deal, that's my opinion, and then you're locked in for 3 years and you don't have to go through this. With Brown, Jake, McDaniel, we get experienced people. I know Vicky has worked with them
Yeah.
before. They're very professional at what they do. They have oversight, quality peer reviews from other firms. If you read through there, those letters are in there. They do well on those. Of course, we also have TVA that checks our reports. They do a really good job, and you're not going to beat that price. My son is in this business, and he says that is unbelievable bargain right there. And part of the reason, and I know we've been with them a while, but that's part of the reason we get that bargain is because they like us. They like doing our audit. They know that we do a good job. They know they're not going to have to get into it real deep. They're, like they would with some places. They trust us, and not that they don't check us. They're checking us. They're spending some time out here. They do a great job, and I recommend we do the 3-year deal, but that is up to you.
Do I hear a motion to approve the contract for a 3-year contract?
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
With a motion and a second, I'll open it up for discussion. Any discussion?
I have a question that's really not related to approving their contract, but it is related to their contract. What is the board's responsibility or duties should the auditors have a finding or a recommendation? Do we approve or oversee the fix of that recommendation?
Steve, what I think would happen is they would have a recommendation that would go to the general manager and to the leadership team at CUB, and I would think that they would be the ones that would report back to us what recommendations, what did they implement from the recommendations, and if they deviated from the recommendations, then I think then it becomes incumbent upon us to hold the general manager accountable in the unlikely event that should occur.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think
So
there would be
we
a,
should expect
What's-
Dudley or Greg or somebody to apprise us of the issue and what they're gonna do, then once it's done, maybe tell us what they did, and that's about it.
You'll get that in the annual review. When they complete their audit, they're always in front of the board.
Yeah.
And what they'll do is they'll go through the practices that they did and any recommendations that they had. The auditor's responsibility is to assure that the financial statements that we present to you all accurately reflect the financial condition, and there's no material deviations from that. That is their fiduciary responsibility. Part of that is, I'm sorry.
I understand, but I somehow think it's also the board's responsibility to make sure that if they have issues, that those get resolved.
so is it not, so what, correct me, but I think what happens is if they found something, which they haven't, I don't believe, if they found
So I
something.
haven't seen one.
Right, so they would then go to management, and if management chose not to, if there was an issue about implementing that change, then it would go into a letter, into the board letter, audit letter to the board, so that the board was aware that there was a disagreement over execution or implementation of a potential
Yeah.
change. And then that's where the board would be notified. So basically, anything that they've ever recommended, if they recommend anything, y'all have addressed, and or else it would have hit the board's responsibility. And it's actually two-pronged. It's incumbent on the CEO or the CFO to disclose that they have not done that, if there was some issue. And it's also very incumbent on the auditor, if
To
they feel,
disclose
to bypass the management if necessary, which hasn't had to occur, so that tells us everything's running pretty smooth. But Steve, our liability shield, because having been through the D&O stuff recently, myself in a very detailed manner, we're relying on the auditor, and they've got their GLPL coverage to protect us. We're relying on management and the obligation they've got under the contracts with us to make sure that's happening. we can address the things we're aware of if we're not aware, and we've got people in place to be relying upon those.
Yeah, and also, Steve, if we would get that report, so we would know when they come before us, we have an ability to ask the auditor, did you find any discrepancies? Did you find any, so not only, there's not a situation that would present itself to where we wouldn't be aware independent of our own, our own staff. So there's checks and balances in there. And then our responsibility would then to follow up with management. What did you do or not do? And if it doesn't meet with our approval, then our recourse would be to address it with the management.
Second tier on that is you've got TVA that does a report also.
I come from a world where when the auditors came in and had a finding, next morning I had to have an action plan to upper management that said what I was going to do.
Right.
And it had to get approved by about 14 levels, and it was tracked by the day, I think.
Yeah. I think your biggest exposure when you have in the accounting world, not other non-accounting areas, but because I got audited by DOE when I was out in Oak Ridge as well, and went through some of those with some of those auditors. But the stuff what they're really measuring against is the accounting principles, and without a lot of turnover or any turnover in the department, the processes aren't really changing, or people you're not having staff turnover that can lead to a difference of how things used to be done, and so that's typical where those things will flag out, or you have a system glitch.
And I
Maybe
think
the
what
software
you're struggling with, Steve, is there aren't any findings. They haven't found anything.
Yeah.
And where you're saying you're used to immediately going in to try to remedy whatever it is. We've been. This is FERC accounting, which is what we deal with, which is unique, and it's very detailed, and we've got a staff in place that keeps very, very good records, and the fact that there are no findings doesn't mean that there are things that they haven't found. I'm just saying there are no findings because what we produce accurately represents what our material financial condition is, and that we have followed the FERC standard accounting principles.
I understand. I just want to make sure that the board was fully apprised of any issues that either got fixed or didn't get fixed should they come up.
And it's my position, my belief, since I've been on the board, that we are or would be. The reason you may not have heard is because it hasn't existed yet to the level of
That's true.
our involvement. But and just this very conversation is enough to exercise our fiduciary. Just us talking about it shows that the board is aware, concerned, brought it up, and had adequate responses from management.
And what we do during the year, when there is because it's really about to accurately reflect net income, it's whether or not you push things that should be expensed to a capital, or things that should be capitalized, you push to expense. That's when you can control what that bottom line looks like. When there is a question, when we have a question, we call them. We call them and we get their advice on how do we handle if we're repainting, and then we're doing structural work down at the sewer plant, and that's what we're doing. Where a repainting would be a maintenance, but because we're structurally going up there and redoing beams, doesn't that count as a betterment? So what it would be an appropriate percentage to capitalize, what would be appropriate percentage to maintenance. Then we would get their input on that, so that obviously smooths the way, and that's another good reason to have them, is because they're not charging us for that. Where many would put you on the clock right then, they share with that. So there are no surprises at the end, because all of these variations are already fully vetted and then recorded accounting appropriately. So when they come in, there is not this, oh my God, why did you do that? You know,
Just ask one very direct question. My assumption, I think the rest of the boards is, there has not been a material finding, at least that I've been on the board.
That's
And
correct.
So I would assume, in terms of answering that, that is correct? There
since
is-
1978.
Okay.
That's correct.
But you know, Steve, what I think,
I haven't seen one either. It was just a theoretical question.
but I think also what you're talking about too is, so this firm is doing an accounting of our finances, and there's also like the secondary of how we perform our duties. That, you know, obviously they're not auditing that type of how we do our work. They don't have the expertise in, as it pertains to how utilities perform their duties. And I think that's where we also internally do best practices. We look
That's
at
right.
how we do things.
And well, they
all the
look
time.
at that internal control. So do we have in place appropriate internal control? But they're not the FBI, do you see? They assure that we have internal controls, which then would properly account for monies going through, for checks. They audit randomly. They give us random vouchers, and they take that all the way back to the bank where the check has been canceled. And then obviously if they see anything, they would expand that.
Does that answer your question?
And I understand that, and the internal controls is really what concerns me more than anything. But I think they do sufficient tests and checks and pushing a piece of test through the system to detect if we've got any major internal control issues.
Any other questions?
I'm gonna, if I can just jump in here for a second, I was gonna say something later, but since we've got this discussion open right now, I think it was in December that we had the audit report. Was it December, November?
Yes, ma'am.
December? And, I think that year after year after year, we were so used to hearing great audit, no findings. I think we almost take that for granted. And I know that's leadership and Greg and Dudley and his team, but the more I've thought about that for the past few weeks, I don't know that we stopped long enough to acknowledge Dudley's contribution to that. Everybody sitting at this board, at this table, knows that an audit is not a one-time event. It is a 12-month event.
That's correct.
And the fact that year after year after year, we have this kind of audit that and I know I speak for the board, thank you, Dudley, for your leadership and your leadership of your team. And that is, I'm sure other companies, other utility companies do not have the audits year after year that we have at CUB. So on behalf of the board, if that's okay with you
Yes.
all, thank
Yeah.
you, Dudley, for your contribution
Thank
to all
you.
of that.
For saying that.
We need a Dudley Fagan Day.
Go ahead, Steve.
Dudley, have you recovered well from the virus?
I have. It really didn't impact me bad at all, Steve. I told Greg today that if it gets me again, it'll probably kill me. It was so light that time, but I really had very mild symptoms. I was very lucky.
Physically, he's good. Visually, he's not that good.
But Steve, I think because we've done such a great job, and because we have these great audit findings, that's somewhat of an anomaly. And I think it's doing your due diligence to just ask some questions, and I'm sure how can we keep at this rate? And I think it's a tribute to our staff and our general manager and the work that they do. And I also feel when you see the overall operation, whether it's Flizzer, whether it's the Flex Pay, well, all the things, the innovations that they've done, and then there's a bottom line. That money's in the bank or it's not. And it's all points to an operation that is capable of having great audits year in, year out. And I know, speaking from my experience at the city, we've done a good job, and we're having great returns, and so it is, when you have a great organization with great leadership in place, you should expect to have a clean report.
I understand.
But my point is, great question.
Yep.
Yeah, great question by you. So we got a motion, we got a second to approve a 3-year contract Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Motion carries. Any other business, Mr. Chairman?
I do, Mr. Chairman, next month on the 24th, we've been asked and we've then agreed to participate in the East Tennessee Regional Leadership Class of 2021. And they're exploring, I think their topic is science and technology. So they asked if we would go through some of the things that we do here with our state-of-the-art operations center, and we're going to give them a primer on our virtual power plant and also Flizzr. So we'll have access to the 2020 leadership class. And then on January the 11th, last month, 4 local power companies, we call them LPCs, filed a complaint and petition against TVA. The 4 LPCs, which are Athens Utility Board, Gibson Electric Membership Corporation, Joe Wheeler Electric Membership Corporation, and Volunteer Energy Cooperative, petitioned FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to intervene and require TVA to provide transmission access to the LPCs. In my opinion, providing transmission access to these LPCs would alter TVA's statutory defined service area and obscure TVA's expectation of load and threaten the current public power model, which would adversely impact the cost of wholesale power and have a costly financial long-term negative effect on the remaining LPCs, which is 153. Last month, I handed out a letter of agreement regarding joint representation at FERC in response to a petition filed by these 4 power companies against TVA, and it is my hope that that will form into a coalition of LPCs to advocate our common position in support of TVA in this action. TVA has agreed to pay all fees and expenses associated with this agreement and representation. So there's no financial burden or liability to CUB or its ratepayers. And I'm asking the board to approve and give me authority to enter into this agreement with Davidson Van Cleve Company, attorneys at law. And
Do you hear a motion?
So moved.
And second?
Second?
All right, motion and second. Any discussion? I mean, I looked at the contract. It's a no-brainer. I'm very overwhelmingly in support of entering this agreement. Does anybody else have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're on the right path here, and I think we're going to be very successful. I think I've tried to help these 4, at least 3 of the 4. I don't like the other one. But I don't even think it's constitutional what they're trying to do, because FERC doesn't have the authority to override what the Congress has put in place. This fence is very important to us, so thank you. That's all I have.
Is there any other business come before this board?
A question?
Yes, sir.
You know, we had a discussion last week, and appropriately so, about the successes and the capability of several of the systems that Gregor Company have embedded in CUB, and how little most folks understand those. Do we have anybody in the board, or we can reach out to that has an insight into the Knoxville News Sentinel who would want to do some sort of story on that?
Yes.
We used to have Bob Fowler, but not anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, the problem right now with the Sentinel, with their staff, is they have cut back to basically a bare bones staff, and I mean, we certainly can reach out. I know some people over there to gauge their interest. Bob Fowler from Oak Ridge used to be assigned, this was his beat, was the Anderson County beat, and they had somebody that had Loudon and Roan, and they laid off all those folks. But that's definitely something to look into for sure.
But I agree, we don't have a newspaper in Knoxville anymore, it's worthless. But occasionally you have a human interest or a technical article that's worth reading. I think that would be a good thing for CUB.
Yeah, I'm with you, Steve, and I think we'll get with the general manager and myself, and we'll see and explore ways to make that happen. Also, I don't know how thrilled the Knoxville Chamber does. They also have a periodical that I think is widely read by the business community, and they also print that in conjunction with the Sentinel. So there may be a couple of ways.
Okay.
Good point. Any other business come before the board today? Hearing none, I'll adjourn.